that we didn't play well defensively for the second week in a row, and that falls squarely on my shoulders. I think when you talk about like having a good defensive system, and then you suffer defeat like that, and in which we did. I think you open up yourself for other things that come in the future, and I think you have to explore options of everything you do from a schematic standpoint to how you install. Like you look at everything, and I just think for us moving forward from a defensive standpoint, like everything from our players to our coaches, like everything has to be on point. Not saying that it was before, but like when you take a look at the last two games, right, and you realize what's taking place, right? I think we had 10, I think it's 8 or 9 touchdowns scored, but on those 8 or 9 possessions, right, 7 of them or 8 of them resulted in 15-yard plus penalties, right? And so a coach always says this: before you can win, you got to keep from losing, and obviously we're doing some things to self-inflict and to hurt us from a standpoint of not being able to recover from it, right? But then when we do have those moments, we can't let those moments snowball into even bigger moments as the game kind of takes place. And so I just want to start off with a statement for you guys and open it up for questions from there.
Is it a lot about just slowing down the running game? And if it is, are there some things alignment-wise and play-calling-wise that you can do to try to slow down the opponent's running game?
Well, I think it boils back down to technique, fundamentals, and details. Obviously we ran this defense all spring ball. We ran it all fall camp. I thought we were pretty good. I still think we're really, really good. But when we just don't do our job and don't do our assignment, it's glaring, right? We are a single gap defense, and if one guy is out of his gap, right, it's not a 5-yard game, right? It's not a 3-yard game, right? And so I think when you see things like this and you expose yourself to things like this, you open up Pandora's box, and right, like as the guy that's the leader of it, I have to take everything into consideration on how we operate from a schematic standpoint, and is that the best thing for us moving forward?
So what's that process been like the last few days, and with you, Brett, and the defensive staff?
It's been challenging to say the least, man. It's been the last few days have been really, 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 really challenging. Not just for myself, but for our players and our defensive staff, because we all have the same expectation, right? And that's greatness. Like we have an expectation level of playing defense the way we know how to play defense, and when we don't reach that goal, right, it's maddening, it's frustrating, it's not how we operate, and so like for us not to have success, like the way we run our defense has been, oh yeah, man, from our players to our coaches, like it's been extremely frustrating. But I think in these times and in these moments, right, you find out who some of your bell cows are and who you can lean on in terms of your players. And so what I will give a lot of credit to our players too is they kept fighting, right? It wasn't always pretty, it wasn't always clean. They kept fighting, and if they continue to do that, I think I know we can clean up a lot of the mistakes and errors we made from a technical and fundamental standpoint.
Aaron, one of your leaders, Johnny Newton, on Friday night kind of summed it up by saying he thinks a lot of these guys on defense are living off of last year.
Yeah.
Are you seeing that on tape, and are you seeing that maybe in practice?
No, I wouldn't say I'm seeing that on tape or seeing that in practice. I think obviously after an emotional loss, right? Obviously, Johnny never minces his words, you know what I'm saying? But I just think from the standpoint of our players, the expectation is to be great, right? And when you fall short of that, because you have done it so well for an extended period of time, when it doesn't go according to his plan, right? I think that's a natural reaction, No, I haven't seen us from a fundamental and technical standpoint just lose ourselves over the last practices, over spring ball, over fall camp, because I think that's something that you pick up immediately within the framework of our defense. You pick it up immediately because you see it immediately. You know what I'm saying? And so is it could it be human nature sometimes for a young man who's had success in the past, or even a coach who had success in the past, to kind of hang his hat on what was done previously? Yeah, maybe. But I could just tell you now, from our coach's perspective, we don't give a damn about the past, man. Like, I think it's allowed us this opportunity to be where we are. But we know moving forward, like, whatever the plan is in place, like, we have to make sure it's corrected, because it was completely unacceptable. It's unacceptable for the university. It's unacceptable in which our brand and how we play defense, man. And so, to Jeremy's point, like, the last couple of days, fellas, have been really, really challenging, really hard. It's been a lot of really good conversations that have came from that. But I think most importantly, it's been some dialogue of some things and some tweaks that we needed to make from a schematic standpoint in which teams are trying to attack us.
What's the challenge for you to pull whatever lever, push whatever button schematically to change if it's dramatically different, whatever ways you've been working up to this point?
Well, I don't think you go into a wholesale change in week two of the season, right? But I do think that you can make minor tweaks, right, that can put your players in position to be successful, whether it's a certain stance, right, whether it's a certain key, in which we had before. Maybe they were keying a tight end and now they need to key a back, right? Whether it's a certain alignment, whether that's talking about with a post player or with a corner. You know, it's those kind of small tweaks, right? And then just from a schematic standpoint, right, being able to not only live in our normal front, but jump in and out of multiple fronts and still be able to have overlap in our defense, right? So if the ball does pop, right, it's not going for 10, 15, 20, 30. You have overlap in the defense, and you allow guys to, at the second level for sure, to get it down.
I seem to remember in the spring and fall camp you guys had talked about you were playing fast. Do you feel like that's translated to the first two games?
Yes and no. I think in elements in which we see normal formations, yes, I do think. But I think for our players, right, if they don't see something that they hadn't seen, a lot of times they may be a little slower. And that's where we as coaches, that's where I have to do a better job at giving them pictures that they probably won't see. They may see once during the course of a game. In Kansas' case, right, we saw a bunch of pictures that me as myself as a coach for the first time, right, that's my first time ever seeing some of them pictures playing football, you know what I'm saying, let alone trying to get it to my players, you know what I mean? So I think at the end of the day, just preparing them for just the unconventional of any team, not just Kansas, but of any team moving forward, and just having a checklist of all those things in which teams can attack you.
Is 2 games enough to make personnel changes, or how will you guys evaluate that going forward?
I think you make personnel changes after any game, you know, based on how a young man is playing, right? Is it so at the end of every game, right? What I try to do is just like, did this young man not play well or screw up on this particular play? Was it a technique error or was it a schematic error, right? And so it was a combination of the two of them this previous game. The game before, it was probably a little more technical things, you know, and so when you start seeing a little more schematic things showing up in how a game is called and the operation of a game, you start to, okay, well, we have to make some minor adjustments or some adjustments wholesalely, right, to fix the problems that we're having. But if it's fundamentals, right, I think that falls back on the young man, and I think it falls back on his coaches ultimately. You know, I can promise you this: we're putting the best players out there that give us the chance to win, right? We're not just throwing guys out there and they hadn't had a good week of practice, or we don't think that they can help us get the victory.
What jumps out at you about the Penn State offense on film?
I mean, they're really, really good. They're really talented. They do what they do. I think they do it really well. The quarterback, Aller, I mean, he has a beautiful arm, right? He's long. He's pretty. He's pretty athletic and moves extremely well in the pocket. They got 2 running backs who I believe can start anywhere in the country. They are very physical downhill runners, right? They pride themselves on running the ball. They have a couple tight ends who I think are physical at the point of attack. They're like extensions of their O-line. They line them up outside. They line them up inside. They line them up in the backfield, right? You have a receiving core, right? They may not have the Penn State names, theoretically, of a first-round draft pick, but those guys, they bust their butt. They can get open. They have great hands. I think they do a really good job down the field of being in phase and catching the ball at its high point when they are throwing the ball, and they're tremendous run blockers, right? They take a lot of pride in that, and so I think that you have a really good offense. You got a really good offense, and then you complement that because they play really good defense as well.
A lot different than the first two teams that you faced offensively.
Yeah, they are. They are a tad bit. I just think for what they run from a schematic standpoint, they are. I mean, the quarterback's a tad bit different because he isn't as jittery as those first two cats. He does have some athletic ability, but he's just a longer, right, bigger target. You know what I mean? And although the other two, the first two game opponents, right, had probably a little more skill than him from a running standpoint, right? I'm not sure if they had the just wholesalely, right? Penn State's O-line is ridiculous. They had the wholesale talent like Penn State has all around, from their O-line to their second to their D-line, right, to their running backs, to their linebackers, to their wide receivers, right? Penn State, in my opinion, Penn State has a complete football team. Not to say that the other two teams didn't, but like I think Penn State makes up for it in every aspect of the offense.
Vettel talk about Matt's help, but just broadly, when that time comes, what's the process of reincorporating him into what you guys do?
You get your best players on the field as fast as you can. If Matt tells me today that he's 100%, right, I don't think you just throw him into the fire, but I think you allow him to rotate, and just based on his comfort level, if he can go, you try to put the young man in a position to be successful, and I mean he knows this. I mean he called me after the game, because he knows how we play defense, and he was just as frustrated. You know what I'm saying? And so like just the care of that young man in particular, and how bad he wants to be back. If he is back this week, you couldn't find a better week for him to come back.
Based off of what you're saying, do you foresee, like you're talking about schematic and personnel, is there operational changes as well as, Andy being in the box? Does he have to be on the field? Does Aaron have to call the plays from the box? Has those conversations?
We've had a lot of those conversations. We're still divulging through a lot of them, being that it's only Monday. But right now, everything's on the table. Everything's on the table because, right, the standard of defense in which we play is just unacceptable.
What's your identity to be on defense?
I want us to be tough, smart, and dependable, right? I don't want us to get penalties, right, at very crucial moments. I want us to give ourselves a chance from a schematic standpoint and a technical standpoint to be fundamentally sound and have an opportunity to play the next play without giving a team, right, 10, 15, 20, right, 30 yards because we decide to do something after the play's over.
Based on your experience as a player and as coach, what's going wrong now be fixed in a week? Is something, can the turnaround be like that?
Absolutely. I mean, I've lived this movie before, unfortunately, right? Like week of Virginia, we decided to make a wholesale change and giving up a bunch of yards and how we were attacked, and we did it, and we kind of flipped the script there moving forward. And so season ain't over, right? Obviously we're getting into conference play, but we still have a long road ahead. But I don't want to have any more of these conversations in terms of coming into you guys and just talking about how bad we've played defensively, right? That's my goal, obviously, as the leader.
How much does that hurt? How deflating is that when the opponent gets 15, 20, 25, 30 yards?
They're massive. We did a study in the off season. If you have three or more like explosives, and what we consider explosive, right? A run of 16 yards or more, a pass of 21 yards or more, your chances of winning and playing good defense are really slim, right? When you have three or more of those in the course of a game, right? 2-yard gains, 3-yard gains, occasionally maybe a 10-yard game. But when you're having explosive plays that amass, right? It was a bunch of plays in the first half, a bunch of plays in the second half of the Kansas game. When you have a bunch of explosive plays that amass for 250 or 300 yards of offense, that's not good. That's not good defense, and so you have to look at everything.
Anything else for Coach Henry? Oh, it's after your first couple games. How much have you kind of learned about the process of being a play caller?
It's I would say that you're responsible for it. You know what I'm saying? Like what you put on tape, right? How the game operates, right? No matter what has happened before, like it's your responsibility to get it right. And I think that I think if I wasn't ready for the moment, I wouldn't have been called to be in the moment. And so I learned a lot from it, just in terms of, right, how our players responded, right. What I did love about, although the Kansas losses, you don't like it at all, but I don't think our players quit at any point during that game. And so I think it's a lot to take from that, because they could have easily laid down, and I challenged them at halftime, and I thought that they were, although it wasn't perfect, I thought that they were better in the second half moving forward. But just learning from it, I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot thus far. I've learned it's hard, and sometimes when it gets hard, you have to stick to your guns. You got to believe in the people around you, and you got to do whatever it takes to get it right, And so right now we're in a foxhole, doing whatever it takes to get it right, and we will.
Anything else for Coach Henry?